Anita Heiss,
Hello, thanks for having me.
and welcome to the Better Reading community. Do you want to say a few words to our lovely loyal readers at Better Reading?
Hello, loyal readers at Better Reading. I'm really thrilled to be here today. I know it's a privilege to be on your live stream. I think this is the first live stream I've ever done.
Well, there you go. There's a first
I'm
for
a virgin
everything.
live streamer.
I'm actually quite surprised. I thought you would have adopted that technology
I like
earlier
to
on.
prepare.
Oh, you do like to prepare. Okay, so you've written a book, another one. Is it the third book? Third fiction novel? Or
No, this is my sixth adult novel.
sixth
Cheryl.
adult novel? See, Cheryl didn't do her research
I
properly.
think it's my second historical fiction, so I've done one on the Stolen Generations that came out in 2001.
Okay, all right. So it's called Barbed Wire and Cherry Blossoms. It is really the most gorgeous cover I've seen lately.
Beautiful.
Isn't it
looks
absolutely
fantastic
beautiful?
At the airport.
Yes, it does, but also a wonderful storyline, and I really loved where it came from. So talk to me firstly about the book, the story.
Yep.
Why should our readers read it?
Your readers should read this book because what it does is, for the first time, it writes into the Australian literary landscape the story of Arambia Mission and the Aboriginal community in Cowra during the Cowra breakout in 1944 on the 5th of August. So we're coming up to the anniversary, and I was in Pearl Harbor in 2014 and really interested in seeing so many Japanese tourists there engaging with a very obviously American version of World War II. And it carried me back to Cowra, and I thought there was nothing that I had read about the Cowra breakout or seen visually like in the movie that had made any mention of the Aboriginal community, which was 4.5 miles in a straight line from the campsite. So I wanted to write a story that married both campsites, because my mother was born on Arambia Mission in 1937. She didn't leave there till 46 after the war was over. So she was alive during that time, and I wanted to write a story where I could bring those two stories together. I didn't want to write the definitive non-fiction work that's been done by Graham Apthorpe, and that book's called A Town at War. Laurie Bamblett had written a Koori history on Arambia. I wanted to write something that would supplement what they've done. And for people who prefer to read fiction, there's a love story in there.
There is indeed.
So Hiroshi is a soldier that runs into the dark of night, and this part is fictional. He escapes and finds himself at Arambia Mission, where Banjo Williams and his family and the elders decide to hide him until the war's over. They don't really have a strategy, but during the course of time, Mary Williams, who takes the food down to him, and by food I mean a bit of damper and a jar of water, a love blooms between two unlikely characters.
Very unlikely and very, very lovable. Gosh, I love them.
Can I tell you, when I was doing a draft,
Yeah.
my mother read every draft, and she said, "Oh, Anita, they wouldn't be kissing 6 weeks after knowing each other." And I'm like, 1944, 2015, people kissed. But it's interesting that the cultural, I had to learn about the cultural nuances, obviously, of the Japanese as well, because a man wouldn't have given away so much information about himself to a Westerner or to a woman as well. So I had to use the premise that they were, times of war makes people do extraordinary things. But for the teachers out there or parents, there's no sex in the books. I was asked that yesterday.
But a lot of it is based on truth, isn't it?
So everything around the breakout, the escape, what happened on the night, that's all factual. Life on the mission, as my mother remembers it, that's her story. I used the Cowra Guardian newspaper as a springboard to introduce different elements of the story throughout the book, so you will see that. I've used text. I sent that text to the Guardian to check that it was okay to reproduce that. So it was really useful to go through the microfiche at Cowra Library to see how the newspaper at the time reported on the breakout, how they reported on Aboriginal people, and it was quite disturbing for me, because it was common in those days to say Abo and Japs in a headline, completely normal, whereas
really
we wouldn't.
disturbing.
Today that would never happen, thankfully. And so, interestingly, when I was going through all the newspaper stuff, the only positive things you would read about Aboriginal people in Cowra at the time was the football team. So it was good that I could actually include some of that, so Mary could share football and sport and social activity with Hiroshi, who would talk about baseball and so forth.
It was really beautiful. It really, for me, it resonated in terms of the truth, and often in parts it read like that. It read like a true story, which is lovely. And I think that that's when fiction hits the mark, particularly historical fiction. So well done. Now, are there any parallels in modern day Australia with our treatment of prisoners of war? Have we learnt anything since that time, do you think?
I think that's a really significant question in light of what's happening on Manus Island
absolutely.
and Nauru. At the time of the Cowra breakout, our military adhered to all the UN conventions that they needed to. Many of the Japanese soldiers did not want to break out of Cowra because they were grateful for the way they were treated. They had more, they put on weight there, their health was better than being on the front line. Where we've had the UN refugee emergency group go into Manus and Nauru and say, we need to get those people out into more humane facilities as a matter of priority. And most recently we've had the absolutely disgusting display of treatment of youths, particularly Indigenous youths in Dondale in the Territory, and we're going backwards. We've gone backwards from a time we're at war, and the way we treated Japanese soldiers at a time when Japan was regarded as the most hated group of people on the planet because of the war, and now we are treating our own people and people who want to live here in the most inhumane circumstances. So I hope this book actually generates some conversation in book clubs as well, and I'd like to put a call to action
and helps
say, do something.
That's
speak up,
right.
speak up,
and helps people just understand where is the empathy. Do you know, and probably naively, but growing up and studying history and reading history, and you looked at all those atrocities and you thought, how did that happen at that time? And then you look at what we're doing now. It is happening in our time. On our watch. And that is, to me, it's mortifyingly embarrassing as an Australian.
And you mentioned empathy. And what I wanted to do with this story is show that we need to judge people as individuals and not groups of people. Because there were groups of individuals that I believe in Cowra at the time that Banjo... wasn't my grandfather, but I believe that my grandfather would have shown empathy and compassion to a man who was like Hiroshi.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I want to talk about writing in general. It is a love of yours. You've got a PhD in creative writing, is that right?
It's in communications and media, but I looked at Aboriginal literature and publishing here, and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and in native North America.
Okay, and a lot of our reading community, a lot of our better reading readers are aspiring writers. Yes. A lot of them are young writers, and a lot of them are Indigenous writers. So what opportunities do you think there are for budding writers generally, and particularly Indigenous writers?
Okay. Good question. And generally I say to anybody who wants to write, there's two things. One is you have to read. You have to be...
Totally agree.
You have to read across genre, across geography, across cultures, so you can see how voice works differently on the page. It'll help you develop and create your own voice and how you want to tell your stories. I think my writing career changed when I became a bigger part of the writing community. Join your local writer centre, start up a writing group, be in a book club group and so forth.
And write all the time.
Every day.
Yeah.
I get fascinated when people say, oh yes, I'm a writer. And I go, I expect if you just have them a writer that they write every day and that they're writing for publication.
That's right.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
So someone that says to me they're a swimmer, I expect them to get in the pool every day. Yeah. They buy all the equipment, the goggles, the flippers, they do it every day. If you're a dancer, you are dancing every day. So it's not writing a poem every 6 months. That's not a writer to me. That's someone that's treating it as a hobby. But if you're serious, it is about setting yourself deadlines. People say to me all the time, I haven't got time to write. Then I see them playing Candy Crush or whatever it is.
Well, if they haven't got time to write, they're not a writer.
Right. You make time. It's like anything.
And any tips for young Indigenous writers?
Two things in terms of the writing community. They still need to read and they still need to join the writer
of course
centre.
they do.
On Facebook, there is outside of Facebook, there's a community called First Nations Australia Writers Network.
Right.
Jackie Huggins is the patron. Dr. Sandra Phillips is the chair. Join that network. There's opportunities for events and so forth. There's a Facebook page going like that. So it's about being aware of what's going on in your industry. And the Black and White programs through the State Library of Queensland has fellowships. They've just partnered. They were formerly with Magabalan. They're now with Hachette.
Fantastic.
And people like Jane, that's terrible. People like Jared Thomas have published through there. Ellen Van Neerven, who's a multi-award winning poet and short story writer. She's the editor there. It's a fantastic opportunity. You've got nothing to lose by putting a manuscript in, and of course the Davy Nipon Award.
Absolutely. Okay, well, they're the tips. Keep writing, put yourself out there, get connected to a group. Now, Anita, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. We were very excited. Don't be nervous. This is a willing and able audience.
I've just made my debut on last year.
She has just made her debut on Better Reading, and hopefully she will come back and talk to us at some other time. Thank you so much, Anita Heiss. You're wonderful.